Sarah Doyle vanished without a sound from her locked home. Marissa Lang's body surfaced in a frozen lake with both women connected by the same mysterious handyman, Dean Halpern, a man who didn't officially exist. On a cold November morning in 2012, the quiet town of Ash Hollow, Maine, woke up to the beginning of what would become its most unsettling mystery. Sarah Doyle, a 28-year-old elementary school teacher, didn't show up for work. At first, no one panicked. Sarah was known to be punctual and responsible, but people figured maybe she had come down with the flu. Her best friend and coworker, Allison Greer, tried calling her a few times. No answer. Texts went unread. By lunchtime, concern had crept in. Sarah wasn't the type to skip work without calling. She had been planning for the school's annual book fair all week. That afternoon, Allison drove to Sarah's house, a modest white cottage nestled at the edge of the woods. Everything looked normal from the outside. Her car was parked neatly in the driveway. There were no signs of disturbance. Allison rang the bell. Nothing. She knocked on the door, waited, then peeked through the front window. She could see Sarah's purse sitting on the hallway table. Her phone was next to it, charging. A half-drunk mug of tea sat on the kitchen counter. The scene was so ordinary it became eerie. Allison called the police. Officers arrived shortly after, forced the door open, and swept the home room by room. Nothing looked out of place. There were no broken windows, no signs of forced entry. The bed was made, the lights were off, and the thermostat was set to Sarah's usual preference. Her toothbrush was still wet, suggesting she had brushed her teeth earlier that morning or late the night before. Her shoes were by the door. It looked like she had never left the house at all. And yet, she was gone. Police canvassed the neighborhood. No one had seen or heard anything unusual. One neighbor reported seeing Sarah jogging 2 nights prior, but that was the last known sighting. There were no suspicious vehicles or unfamiliar faces spotted around her property. Investigators checked her phone records, social media, and bank activity. Nothing stood out. Her last phone activity was a text to Allison sent at 9:12 p.m., the night before, casually reminding her to bring extra scissors to school. Her phone pinged its final signal at 2:13 a.m., still connected to the home's Wi-Fi. As the days turned into a week, the search widened. Helicopters flew over the surrounding forests. Volunteers walked miles through the woods, calling her name. Divers scanned the nearby lake. No sign of Sarah. News stations picked up the story, branding it the Ash Hollow disappearance. The image of Sarah, a smiling woman with long brown hair and soft eyes, was plastered across screens and flyers. Friends described her as kind, quiet, and dependable. She had no known enemies, no history of mental illness, and no plans to leave town. Her family insisted she would never run away. But the more investigators looked, the fewer answers they found. It was as if Sarah Doyle had simply vanished from her home, leaving behind only silence and a growing sense of unease that something far darker had happened. 3 weeks had passed since Sarah Doyle vanished, and the town of Ash Hollow was slowly sinking into unease. Theories swirled. Some believed she had run away from a secret life. Others feared she had been kidnapped or worse. Police maintained a steady presence around her home, still treating it as an active crime scene, though nothing new had surfaced until a cleaning crew was sent in to tidy the house for a possible family visit. It was a cold afternoon when one of the cleaners, moving old boxes in the basement, noticed something odd. A section of the wall looked slightly off in color and texture. Curious, he tapped it. It sounded hollow. Pulling the boxes aside, he discovered a wooden panel that didn't match the rest of the wall. With a gentle pull, it came loose. Behind it was a small, narrow room, completely hidden from view unless someone knew where to look. The space was cramped, barely wide enough for one person to lie down. Inside was a thin mattress on the floor, covered with an old blanket. Empty food wrappers were strewn in a corner. A lantern with dead batteries sat beside a pile of crumpled tissues. There were water bottles, a few books, and a worn notebook with torn-out pages. The air smelled stale, as if someone had been living in that space for some time without ventilation. The discovery turned the entire investigation upside down. Police cordoned off the area, dusted for fingerprints, and examined the items inside. None of the prints matched Sarah's. In fact, most belonged to an unknown male, someone who hadn't been identified in any criminal database. This wasn't Sarah's hiding place. It was someone else's. Questions erupted. Had someone been living in her home without her knowing? Could the person in the hidden room be connected to her disappearance? And if so, why had there been no signs, no noise, no damage, no stolen items? Detectives began to re-examine everything. They brought in neighbors for further questioning. One older man who lived behind Sarah's house mentioned something he had thought important earlier. He had seen a man standing near Sarah's fence several times over the past month, always in the evening, always watching. He thought it might have been a delivery driver or landscaper. He never saw the man go into the house, but now that detail carried weight. Investigators also reviewed home improvement records and found that Sarah had hired a handyman 6 months earlier to help with basement repairs. His name was listed as Ben Carter, but further digging showed no contractor licensed by that name in the state. In fact, no record of him existed at all. That repair job had been one of the only times Sarah let a stranger into her house. The hidden room changed everything. What had seemed like a clean disappearance now reeked of planning and secrecy. Someone had hidden right beneath Sarah's feet, likely watching her for weeks. But the most chilling part wasn't just that someone had been living there, was that whoever it was had vanished without a trace. Just like Sarah. 2 months after Sarah Doyle's disappearance, the case took a dramatic and tragic turn. In January, a body was discovered by ice fishermen in a frozen lake roughly 30 miles from Ash Hollow. The corpse, partially submerged and preserved by the cold, was that of a young woman. She matched Sarah's height and build. Her hair was dark and long. She wore clothing similar to what Sarah had last been seen in. For many, especially her grieving family, it felt like the mystery had finally come to a heartbreaking end. The body was transported to the state medical examiner's office. News spread quickly, and television stations reported that Sarah Doyle had likely been found. Vigils were held. Teachers and students from her school gathered in the gymnasium to remember her. But while the town mourned behind closed doors, investigators were growing uncertain. Some small details didn't align. When the autopsy was completed, the results stunned everyone. The body did not belong to Sarah Doyle. The victim was another missing woman, Marissa Lang, who had vanished over a year earlier from a town about 70 miles away. Her case had gone cold months ago, with no strong leads or suspects. She'd been living alone at the time of her disappearance, and just like Sarah, she had no history of mental health struggles, no enemies, and no reason to vanish. What caught the detectives' attention wasn't just the physical similarities between Marissa and Sarah, but something far more chilling. When they reviewed Marissa's file, they found that she had also reported having basement issues a few months before she disappeared. She had hired a contractor to help with flooding. The name on the invoice? Ben Carter. It couldn't be a coincidence. The same fake name had been used with both women, both of whom had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Investigators compared notes and saw an eerie pattern. Both homes had similar construction work done around the same time. Both women were single in their 20s, lived alone, and had no history of running away. And both homes had unusually built or modified basement areas. Realizing they might be dealing with a serial predator, police expanded their search. They combed through property records, contractor licenses, and renovation permits throughout New England. In dozens of cases, they found suspicious repairs listed under different aliases, all connected to one man. The work orders often featured fake addresses or phone numbers, and the payments were mostly in cash. They eventually linked all the aliases back to one person, Dean Halpern, a drifter with no social media presence and a clean criminal record. But the more they dug, the stranger things became. Dean had legally changed his name 3 times over the last 15 years, always in different states. He kept a low profile, moved frequently, and left behind little evidence of his life. With this revelation, investigators feared. They were dealing with more than just Sarah and Marissa. They now believed Dean Halpern could be responsible for the disappearances. Deaths of several women across multiple states. But before they could act, he vanished without a trace, just like his victims. The manhunt for Dean Halpern quickly escalated into one of the largest regional criminal investigations in years. Detectives, state police, and even the FBI joined forces, determined to track down the elusive figure, now suspected of preying on multiple women across New England. His last confirmed alias, Ben Carter, had been used at least 6 times in different towns, always involving home repairs for young women living alone. Each time, he disappeared without a trace once the work was done. But now that investigators had his real name, they believed they were closing in. What baffled law enforcement was how clean his record was. No prior arrests, no known family, no paper trail beyond what he left behind in construction work. Dean Halpern was like a ghost present, only in fragments. But the deeper they dug, the darker the trail became. Police began contacting women who had hired him for home repairs in the past. Some remembered him as quiet and polite. Others said he gave them an uneasy feeling, but he never did anything overtly threatening. Still, several of the women reported strange occurrences after his visits, missing items, odd sounds at night, or unexplained changes in their basements or attics. Then came the breakthrough. In a rented storage unit registered under a different alias, police uncovered a disturbing collection of personal belongings. Boxes of women's clothes, photographs, diaries, and even items like toothbrushes and hairbrushes were carefully labeled with names and dates. Among them was a journal that included brief handwritten notes about different women observations about their routines, living conditions, and home layouts. Sarah's name was there. So was Marissa's, and at least 10 more that police had never heard of before. But still no bodies. No evidence of murder. Just belongings. As if Dean had kept souvenirs. He hadn't stolen valuables or money. He took things that were personal, almost intimate, items that would likely go unnoticed if they disappeared. This suggested a long-standing pattern of stalking and intrusion, maybe even before any actual abductions occurred. As police worked to identify the other women from the notes, they expanded their search to other states. But Dean remained a step ahead. Weeks turned into months. Then, unexpectedly, a gas station security camera in rural Oregon caught his image. He was clean-shaven, wearing a delivery uniform, and driving a white panel van later found to be stolen. It was the first visual confirmation of him since the case broke. He looked calm, collected, almost invisible in the crowd. Authorities tracked the van to a remote forested area nearly 100 miles away from the nearest town. There, tucked deep among the trees, they found a small hand-built cabin. It was isolated, off-grid, and hard to reach even by foot. They approached cautiously, prepared for anything. The door was locked from the inside. When they forced it open, they found Dean Halpern, dead and apparent suicide. A note lay beside him, short and cryptic, reading only, "You won't find them." Though Dean was no longer a threat, the mystery wasn't over. The question remained, what exactly had he done with the missing women? And were there any who had survived his terrifying game? The cabin was eerily quiet when investigators entered. It was a single room made of rough-cut timber, sparsely furnished with only the basics: a bed, a table, a propane stove. But it was the metal box tucked beneath the floorboards that would redefine the entire investigation. Heavy and sealed with a latch, the box contained dozens of videotapes, carefully labeled with names and dates. Among them was a name everyone had been searching for: Sarah Doyle. The tapes were sent to a secure facility for review. What they revealed was both horrifying and illuminating. Each tape showed footage of a woman filmed in hidden locations, often from inside their own homes. Dean had installed cameras during his repair visits, sometimes even building hidden compartments behind walls or ceilings to watch his victims in real time. He had studied them like prey, sometimes for weeks, before ever making a move. But the tapes didn't stop there. Sarah's tape was unlike the others. It began with surveillance footage from her own house, showing her reading, making tea, and preparing for bed. But after a cut, the setting changed. She appeared in a small room, frightened but alive. The timestamp showed it had been recorded 2 weeks after she went missing. She wasn't restrained, but she looked emotionally broken, glancing nervously at the door between every sentence she spoke. It seemed Dean had kept her in captivity, possibly in a hidden location near the cabin. Her physical condition deteriorated gradually in the later footage, pale, thin, her voice a whisper. But then came the final tape, dated just 3 days before Dean's death. It showed Sarah wearing a backpack and warm clothing. She looked stronger, more alert. She was outside, standing at the edge of the forest near the cabin, clutching a hand-drawn map. Dean's voice was never heard, but she appeared to listen to someone off camera before turning and walking into the trees. The footage ended with her silhouette disappearing into the dense woods. Investigators launched a massive search operation. Search dogs, helicopters, and drones combed the surrounding forest and nearby riverbanks. They found boot prints that matched the ones seen in the video, leading into a ravine. But just as suddenly as they appeared, they vanished, washed away by recent rainfall or lost in rocky terrain. No body was found. No confirmed sightings ever came. The tapes suggested Sarah had managed to escape, either by outsmarting Dean or being let go. Theories varied. Some believed she had died in the woods, unable to survive the harsh conditions. Others speculated she didn't want to be found and had used the opportunity to vanish on her own terms. There were even claims of her being spotted in remote towns, but nothing was ever confirmed. Sarah Doyle's fate remains one of the most haunting, unanswered questions in modern crime history. The twisted trail left behind by Dean Halpern led to many dark places, but never to a definitive ending. What she endured, how she escaped, where she went, remained shrouded in silence, leaving behind a story full of shadows, fear, and a final, enduring mystery.